Hi, and welcome to Minnesota Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Jen Zielinski. We just got done with what I would say a great 2024 election season. We didn't get everything we wanted in Minnesota, but I would say that we're winning. And with us today is actually former host of the show, Max Rymer. And Max, you have a new title to add.
I guess I'm still getting used to it, but representative-elect for the District of 28B, Chisago County.
So you won an election.
I did.
2024 was great for you.
I guess, yeah, it was fantastic. You know, threw my hat in the ring around May when former Representative Ann New Brindley stepped down, and thought a lot about it. It was kind of a very condensed time period to go from when she stepped down to when the endorsing convention was. And, you know, my wife and I thought a lot about it, prayed about it, and came to the conclusion that we needed to delay our endorsing convention in order for me to make it work. So we did that. The delegates of 28, Chisago County, did decide to do that. And yeah, here we are. The rest is history. Got the endorsement. Didn't have a primary challenge. And won by 31%, which I'm not used to that level of political success.
Coming out of the metro area where we a little bit bluer than I think the rest of Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
But you won that thing that we're always looking for with Republicans. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome back to the show.
It's fun to be here again. It's fun to be here with you, and you're doing a great job. And how the turntables turn.
How the turntables, yes. So first of all, for our viewers, especially if we have any new viewers, tell us about yourself. Who are you, and what brought you into politics?
Yeah, so I'm Max. I've been involved in Republican politics for the better part of 10 years or so. My background is in digital marketing, so I owned a digital marketing agency that I started at the end of 2015 into 2016. Exited from that agency in 2023 at the beginning of it, and now I'm a co-owner of a digital marketing agency that works with real estate agents. And being involved in politics all this time, I did do a lot of digital marketing campaigns for candidates and causes, both in Minnesota and across the country.
Cool.
And that's how I got plugged in. You know, that's how I got plugged into running campaigns and figuring out how they work and getting to know the players, you know, at the statewide and my local level and from the with the endorsement process. And for a spell, I was a Republican National Committee man, and
that's right.
Stepped down from that to run a governor's campaign. So. I mean, that's kind of the background. I got 3 kids. My wife and I live in North Branch, Minnesota, and the District of 28B encapsulates almost all of Chisago County. It cuts off on the west-hand side of North Branch, but the rest of it, Lindstrom, Taylor's Falls, North Branch. There are numerous townships in the district. Chisago City. That's what the district is.
So kind of the area that maybe if you're in the metro area, you're driving up to the cabin, you're driving up to Duluth, driving up through your district.
Yeah, usually it's what I like to tell people is if you're driving 35 north, it really is kind of the last best step until you reach Duluth. But you'll have a lot of people who have gone up to Taylor's Falls for an afternoon and just want to take in the river and just be among the shops and things of that nature. A lot of people really love traveling through the district, and it was really fun to have people randomly travel up north and see my yard signs and text me about them.
That's great.
Yeah.
And now, when you were campaigning, you're obviously done with campaigning. You said it was pretty fast there, but a lot to it. I think anybody who's ever campaigned knows that it's not just a you thing. You're working with your family. You're making sure that, hey, this is going to be a teamwork effort, and there's going to be some delegation between us because now you're taking on new roles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. In the past, every time I've told my wife this is going to be easy when it comes to politics, it never is. It's never easy, and I burned a lot of social capital, you know, with my wife, promising over and over and over again that something we do, running campaigns, running for office, being the RNC committee man, you know, doing websites for candidates, that all of it would be easy. And this time around, she actually talked to me about 3 weeks ago, right before the election. She was like, hey, I just want to tell you, you told me this was going to be easier than normal, and it was easier than normal. So, husband points.
Win there.
Yeah.
Aside from, you know, your obvious win.
Yeah.
When you were campaigning, what did you hear from voters? What were they looking for you to do when you get to the Minnesota House of Representatives?
Yeah, up where I'm at in Chisago County, it was just a lot of immense frustration with the DFL trifecta.
Okay.
And a lot of people had their pet peeves about blowing an $18 billion budget, having some of the most radical social policies and abortion policies on the planet that were just rammed through. You had people who were in swing districts in both chambers who just acted as if they had just this full mandate instead of a one-seat majority. So as I talked to voters, what I told them was, hey, it's really important to bring balance back. And to the extent that we can do that this session with literally a 50-50 split in the House, we have to. But what I campaigned on was, I was like, two things, right? We have to go down there and be fighters in St. Paul. That's what my voters wanted, because they saw just how radical that agenda had become. We want fighters. We want people who are going to hold the DFL accountable. We want balance. And then, like, another thing that I said was, because we have this alternative media now that's emerging, I think it's important to actually expose what happens down there a little bit. When you have a DFL member talking about potentially abolishing the Christian church, which is something that was said from the House floor, where are our counterweights to say this is what they actually stand for and this is what they're actually going to do?
And there's so many Democrats that, practice religion, just having that come out saying, do you really support, again, we're not going to go down the religious road in this show, but do you support what this is being said? Like you said, bringing that light to what's going on.
Yeah, there's numerous examples of that. You had the other representative, her name slips me at the time, but from St. Louis Park, talking about how men menstruate. She was bold enough to proclaim that. And I think a lot of Minnesotans don't fully understand the type of DFL politician they're voting in right now. DFL, there's still, especially in the metro area, there's still this sense that my representative is normal, I can trust them, that kind of thing. But they all went into bed together. They all got to dig their own grave together because they all worked in uniform fashion the past 2 years. So my voters are looking for accountability, are looking for repealing some of the mess that was created by Tim Walz and the trifecta, and just holding Democrats' kind of feet to the fire on a daily basis.
And we saw them just push legislation through in 2022 like crazy.
Without question.
Even some of the bills that maybe, Republicans may or may not agree with, but pushing through, and I'll bring up the marijuana bill, whether or not you agree with that as a Republican, the standards weren't set. So who can actually sell it? Who can,
Yeah, and as I've talked to city leaders up by where I'm at, it's just very apparent that, one, we don't have a pot czar, right? We got rid of her, and we had no plan when we passed this stuff to effectively guide cities on how to implement it. So I've talked to mayors, I've talked to the Taylor's Falls mayor, I've talked to other mayors in my community about, like, well, how do you navigate this? And they don't have the answers. So if you're the DFL, you passed all this garbage. You put it on all your mailers. It propelled Tim Walz to a vice presidential nomination to have all these progressive policies. But they still don't have a plan. There is so much mess to clean up when I go down there, and I intend to do it.
Now, you brought something up. We have something weird coming up in 2025. We have a split Minnesota House of Representatives.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, well, as we film this episode right now, we're looking at one seat in the Minnesota House in Shakopee that was decided by 14 votes, and 20 votes, they just said, can't find them, threw them away. So there might be a new election that happens, and I'm advocating that a new election happens in that race. So yet to be determined. But now what I've observed in the State House being, again, just an even 50% split right now. There is a leadership negotiation process where you kind of determine our leader, Lisa Demuth, and then their leader, they come together and they kind of determine who's going to lead what committees, how are we going to share power, how do we basically operate as a 50-50 split caucus. And for me, where I sit, being kind of a new incoming member, it's to listen and support what they're doing and bring insight, like in the negotiation process. I've been part of negotiations, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens, Jen, over the next few months, because this has not happened since, I believe, 1979.
I was just about to ask, has this ever happened before in Minnesota?
Yeah, one time in recent history.
Okay.
And I believe it was 1979 or 1971 where it happened.
So we're looking at something new that we're going to have to deal with. How is this going to look for legislation going through the House?
Yeah, I think for the time being, it's going to really matter to build some strategic coalitions with Democrats, to pull them and say, you were way too extreme last cycle.
Yes.
Come on back. Join me on this initiative. Let's clean up some of your mess. I want to see that kind of be the focal point, for a lot of representatives, myself included. But beyond that, let's just say we're totally cloistered. We don't attempt to work with each other. There's a stalemate at all times. I think it's a good chance you go through 2 years here and not see a whole lot of productive anything, get done, which is not the end of the world, by the way.
No.
If government is not doing anything, just to be clear, I don't think that's the worst outcome.
Well, and we always hear the scary word, government's going to shut down. No one's going to get paid. Yeah. Is that going to happen? Are we going to see that?
It could, but listen, the DFL had power for 2 years. It is now time for them to come to the table. We will offer, I am sure we will offer some kind of solution. We will offer a budget. We will offer a number of things. But I think the DFL has had such immense uniform power for so long that they're arrogant. They think they don't need to come to the table, but they do. So I think no matter what the outcome is this session, it'll be a really healthy thing for that party to know that they need to come to the table.
To kind of backtrack and say, wait a second, we had a surplus that we way overspent.
Yep. In fact, there was a retiring representative, DFL, Gene Pulowski, and he actually was caught on camera saying, I hope that Republicans take power because it's good to repeal and correct and kind of clean up some of the mistakes when somebody has uniform power. And for him to say that as a DFLer, I completely agree with him. Our agenda should be, all right, Democrats, come to the table, help us figure out, a budget that makes sense, help us get back to some spending levels which are at least modest.
Not crazy.
Yeah, and then let's ditch the human rights, amendment. Let's ditch the effort to get rid of PSEO credits for Christian schools. They have totally jumped the shark in the last 2 years.
Yes, and now looking at some legislation, you talked about bringing Democrats back to the table. We always like to say, if we have our way, what would you want to do? And looking at maybe some ideals, things you do want to accomplish.
Yeah.
What do you see yourself also realistically doing as well?
Yeah, well, I think when we talk about where we are at right now, we just had a historic election where Donald Trump created a brand new coalition of voters. It didn't happen to the extent that it happened across the country in Minnesota. But what you're seeing now is you are seeing the base of the Republican Party, the people who have sent us to office. It is a younger, working class, multiracial coalition that don't think about their own identity, but instead are focused on some of the common issues that impact all of us. So when we talk about public safety, when we talk about returning spending levels to normal, having some actual, tax conformity that serves Minnesota families, empowering small business owners. These are the kind of general themes that I think I've had experience with and can bring to the table. If I had everything, it'd be like, hey, we got to get back to 2019 spending levels.
Yes.
We have to totally regulate the way that we spend money in the government. We're going to open up rip-roaring capital to come to Minnesota by reducing regulation, by actually having tax cuts for our small business owners. And then beyond that, it's like we have to get serious about public safety. We have to support our police. We have to fund them and give them the tools that they need. I think if you take care of those two things, the economic and regulatory factor in someone's life, and then you take care of the public safety, can you walk the streets and feel safe?
Yes.
If you create that environment, it's a petri dish of opportunity. Government doesn't need to continually step in to impact people's lives.
And I think that's, an ideal goal. And it's almost like the things you talked about are not only just Republican or Democrat ideals, they're ideals that people want.
I don't think they are Republican or Democrat.
No.
We just had an election that was determined on common sense policy at a national level, secure our border, and then, protect protect the working class, cut your taxes, help it, make it easier for you to live and work and have a family. And as we think through like our strategy in Minnesota, I think we have to think about how do we best serve the worker and how do we best serve the family.
Yep.
Because big corporations are never going to be on our side.
Yeah, and like how can we make costs come down? How can you, get stuff back to common sense? Like you said, we're on Thanksgiving here, coming across the Christmas holiday season where people are spending like crazy.
Well, and it's a joke, right? Because then you have, I believe it's the White House coming out and saying, hey, costs have come down this Thanksgiving. To feed a family of 10 at Thanksgiving, it's only $58.
I spent $90 for a couple things the other day.
$58 for 10 people? What are you shopping for? Like, are you just eating Skittles,
Ramen?
at Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
So it's a joke. These people are out of touch, and they've proven that they're out of touch. Their coalition has fallen apart because they are out of touch. You asked about, like, what do I think is reasonable?
Yes, yeah.
I think that the job of the Republicans this session is to do two things: to show Minnesotans that we are effective leaders and that we're trustworthy to lead, So making sure we have reasonable proposals where the DFL comes to the table and they're the ones forced to negotiate. But we also have to clean a bunch of stuff up, Jen. We have to repeal regulations. We have to cut some taxes. We have to cut some spending on, ridiculous programs. Like, there are modest things that the Republican 50% can do, and we have to prove to Minnesotans that, again, we're effective leaders.
Yep, and I think, sometimes some of the people who really get into politics, who really get into the party, they don't see us being Republican enough or conservative enough, but coming to that understanding where it might not look like that right in 2025, but we can bring back that normalcy, we can start to bring things back. The pendulum basically swung to the left like crazy in 2020 and 2022, and now we're feeling the effects of that.
And we have an opportunity to present ourselves as reasonable, worth listening to, and effective leaders, like I say.
Yes.
I think that it doesn't mean we don't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean that we expose kind of the radical left of their party, but what it does mean is that when we come out with proposals, when we put our ideas forward, it has to serve this broad coalition of new voters that we brought into the fold.
Absolutely. Now, just looking back at, when you go back to your district, how do you keep bringing this forward, keeping them, involved as well? What do you see yourself doing with that as a representative for them?
Yeah, it's keeping kind of an open door of communication, having my email, and in off cycles I have my phone number publicly available so people can just contact me. But beyond that, right now I'm in this phase of getting oriented at the House and also coming back and meeting with municipal leaders and business leaders, talking to mayors, talking to local businesses who maybe had something that they wanted to see in bonding last year that didn't come through. So it's a lot of those conversations and just letting people know that I'm going to be there for them. I want to fight for them. I love Chisago County. My wife and I chose to live there, which is a big part of what I ran on. We're not lifers in Chisago County. I've only been up there for 4 years.
Yeah.
But we chose to live there because we love the area. We want to keep it special, and I want to assist city leadership to just know that I'm an open book and always ready to serve them and their people too.
Yep, and I think that's what we see from candidates. Sometimes they have grown up in that place forever. That's their life, but that's not always the case for other people. I've moved from St. Paul to Minneapolis to some of the suburb areas, and just making that your home, but also coming to want to fight for your home.
Yeah, exactly. I think, living in Bloomington for as long as we lived, it's like I saw how that city changed pretty rapidly over the 7-8 years that we lived there. And I know what it looks like going up to a place that we chose, how to protect what you have that's special. Because Bloomington, for 100-some years was Republican and conservative values, and in the last 10 years, 12 years, it's pretty radically changed.
It has. It's Bloomington, Edina, even St. Louis Park, Minnetonka area.
Yep.
But that being said, you had a pretty big lead in your race, 30%.
Yeah.
How do you communicate with those who didn't vote for you when they, feel like you're going to take away their rights or make their lives horrible.
I think it's very similar. It's just letting everyone know that we may disagree on some things. But again, I want to hear from you as much as I want to hear from the people who did vote for me. Because being in business for myself, you sit across the table from a lot of people who don't agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And you still got to come to a conclusion and a deal and a thing that works. I think specifically with with the rights issue and the abortion issue. I think for a long time Minnesotans felt like conservatives felt like we could use kind of abolitionist language. And what that's led to is the most extreme abortion policies in the entire world in Minnesota. I think what people are open to right now, and where Republicans can get wins on this messaging issue, is talking to them about, we're not looking to ban it. We keep using the word ban, but what we are looking to do is have reasonable measures in place that protect mothers, emphasize motherhood, that, beyond, you can say 15 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, but I think we have to have a conversation about incrementalism. How do we get back to a place of common sense that 75% of Minnesotans agree on? So that's one issue, I think, right away that I'm pro-life. I'm personally pro-life. I would prefer that abortion did not exist. I've said that before. I think the way that we work that issue now is to talk through how do we actually come to some kind of reasonable conclusion. So we're not coming to the same place as North Korea and China and just these super extreme, radical places.
Yes. And like you said, Minnesota has just some of probably the most, I want to say, progressive or liberal abortion laws, even further left than Europe or most
Oh, yeah, totally further left than Europe. I said, we're competing with North Korea.
Yeah.
But, this is another thing where the DFL ran way too hard to the left 2 years ago, where there were reasonable, modest, protect the baby protections that they just, and that were years old, that had lasted maybe 10, 20 years, that were determined by a bipartisan consensus from Minnesota politicians. And since then, right, they just steamrolled that. They said, nope, women's right to choose all the time, all costs, everything else be damned. And by doing that, again, we find ourselves at a place where our laws are not congruent with what Minnesotans actually believe.
And they pick these extreme cases. Something horrible happened,
Totally.
But it's just these extreme cases where now we have to have abortion basically up to the time of birth,
and post-birth, which Tim Walz denied on stage.
Yes.
The law that he signed would allow for that. He can lie all he wants about that. It does. So what I'm here to say, let's get back to a place of reasonable consensus, and I think we can do that.
Yeah, and I look at the same with our schools. One of the things we're hearing on the news is how so many school budgets are just crazy. They're out of money at this point.
Such a joke.
Can we fix that at the state level, or is that going to be something we're going to have to struggle with?
Yeah, one thing we got to do right away is we gave these schools all this money, but what we did was we put a regulation burden on all of them, which takes that money. You got to hire new people to meet this regulation, this new burden that we put on schools. We gave them all this money, and then we gave them all of these handcuffs to that money. So I think a reasonable thing that we can get done this session is to tear away some of those regulations we gave to them, and that'll save them money. That'll save the taxpayer money, and it'll also make the school more efficient. Down the road, we talk about this kind of broad working class coalition. I'd like to see us have more school choice in Minnesota.
Yes.
Empower families. Give families the dollars that they can actually go and choose a school that's going to work best for them. If I had my dream, to your question earlier, it would be that. Let's empower families. Let's empower them to make a decision for their kid. If they don't like the school they're in, give them the resources to go and make a decision to get them into a school that will work for them, or to homeschool, or to join a co-op. We live in this time where there is so much diversity in the tools of education that I feel like the model that we have right now is outdated, and the DFL has to pay off people, basically, and return favors, and that's where their policy making comes from.
I'm sure you weren't, the school unions weren't a big fan of you.
No, I'm sure they were not. But
yeah.
I talked to local superintendents, though, and I've made my stance as clear as I'm making it to you, and that I want to support public schools. I want to get rid of some of those burdens that we attached to the dollars that we gave them, and that's that's reasonable. They're open. They're open to ideas.
Yeah,
it's just having a conversation.
Exactly, and like you said, bringing that to the Democrats, coming to that consensus. I think you guys can do that. And what I hope what will happen is it gets pushed to the Senate, and then hopefully our governor, that former VP candidate.
Yeah, it'll be it'll be interesting to see what kind of Tim Walz we get when he comes home. This is a guy whose agenda was rejected by the country.
Yes.
Who comes back extremely damaged. Who has basically indicated that he wants to run for an unprecedented third term. He kind of floated that out there in a speech, and it's like, hey man, come home and have some humility.
Yes.
Come home and work with us on things, because what you ran on, your platform that you want to take the last 2 years of Minnesota and sell that to the American people, that got roundly rejected, and I think over time it'll get roundly rejected by Minnesotans too. So come home, work with us. I'm going to make him a cake. I'm going to make him a cake that says, welcome home, coach. All things considered, we're glad to have you back.
Minnesota took one for the team. We'll just say that when it comes to...
I think that's been very clear. The response to him was not a good one.
Yeah, and you want to talk about plans. I don't think him and former VP Harris, former candidate Harris, they had a plan either.
No. They tried to sell America on some of the ideas that Tim Walz rammed through here.
Absolutely.
They're deeply unpopular. They're deeply radical.
Yes.
And it's time to come back. Show some humility. You guys lost the House. You guys lost your message lost at the vice presidential level. Come home, have some humility. Let's have some adult conversations about what we can get done, what we can clean up from the last 2 years of disaster.
And I think coming out of that bubble too, that sometimes the Democrats get in across the country. We even saw this in 2016, where the general population doesn't want what you guys are pushing. They wanted that in 2020, but they don't want that.
It's obvious.
Yes.
It could not be more clear. So I'm hoping that he comes back and is willing to work with us and have an attitude of humility.
Couple minutes left. Do you have any last thoughts or, things you want to get across?
Not really, Jen. Okay. If people want to kind of learn more about where I stand on the issues, you can go to maxrymer.com. That's my campaign website. And my plan here for the next several weeks is to get a little rest and also...
Important.
Yeah. And then to just kind of feel out what this split power sharing is going to look like. So I'm in listening mode right now at the State House. There'll come a day where I need to talk a little bit more, but right now it's getting the lay of the land and figuring out how to be effective.
The next step that everyone who's been a candidate, this is the next step you get to take. You got to learn first, but...
Yeah, the dog caught the car on this one, right?
Yes.
So I'm having to just listen. I'm learning a lot, and that's where I'm going to stay for a little while. Because in order to, break the rules, you got to know the rules.
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing over the next few weeks.
Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jen. An absolute joy.
Thank you for joining us on Republican Roundtable. Until next time.